My name is Marcin Lewandowski. I'm from the company Software Mention. We are an agency, software agency located in Poland, in Krakow, beautiful city of Krakow. And we are not a large team, but I think what makes us distinct is that we are not only making the apps for our customers, or which are mostly located in the United States, mostly in New York or Bay Area, but we are also actively creating technologies that a lot of you might know, mostly in the sphere of React Native and Expo. Actually, a large part of the core team of Expo is us, and we are also official partners of Facebook when it comes to React Native. So in practice, that means that we are creating and maintaining several very popular React Native libraries. You might know some of them, like React Native Reanimated, or Gesture Handler, or React Native Navigation, and they are pretty popular. We are having a full-time team that is responsible for maintaining it. And recently we started cooperation with Shopify, which sponsors us and allows to put more developers to the team, so we can fix the bugs faster, iterate faster, and importantly, work on the new version of Reanimated that is going to be undergo significant refactor and be way more performant, flexible, and allow a lot of things that are not possible with the current library. And the release should happen pretty soon. The host today is Mahmood, who is a senior developer in Shopify. He's going to introduce by himself, so I'm not going to do this. When it comes to the organizational matters, the plan is that the webinar will take 45 minutes, and the question and answers later will take 15 minutes, but the limit is not strict. So if you will have more questions, feel free to ask Haris. You already received a link, and it will be also shared again, that allows you to sign up for the follow-up session with Haris, who will answer some of your questions that might arise later on after the webinar. Just to put this in context, this is the first webinar from the series of webinar we plan to do with Shopify. We are also planning to have workshops, more or less one in a month. So if, like all of you, until you didn't click the checkbox, you will receive information about upcoming events. The recording of this will be available for the people who attended this webinar or will register for the next one. So nothing is lost. And what else to say? I hope you are going to spend a nice evening with Haris, or nice morning if you're in the States. You will learn a lot, and you will come back to us next time. So I'm not going to make this any longer. I pass the mic to, virtual mic, to that finally works to Haris. So thank you very much. Have a nice time.
All right. Hi, folks. Let's just double check. Can everyone just make sure that they hear me before I continue on? Excellent. Perfect. So I'm just going to get this started on my end. Perfect. So we're going to get started here. This is just my testing slide. Don't mind me. As mentioned, my name is Haris Mahmood. I'm a senior engineer at Shopify. There's my GitHub and Twitter and Instagram handles, so feel free to hit me up. So Shopify is a leading global commerce company, which means that we provide the tools that you'd need to start, grow, market, manage a retail business of any size. Our platform is engineered for performance, scale, and reliability, while delivering a better shopping experience for customers worldwide. Now, a couple of additional neat facts is that we support over 1 million merchants on our platform, which is truly incredible. We're also still hiring. So we're hiring for engineers. We're not slowing down at all. We're still hiring for remote roles as well in North America, in Europe, and in the UK time zones for some teams. We're also still making relocation offers as well to other parts of the world, where the relocate candidates will be relocating them when it's safe to do so. So you may still you'll get your offers now, but won't be relocated until it's okay for us to do so. We also have a pretty awesome 3-day onboarding experience. Our onboarding experience is now fully remote as well. So even if you're joining Shopify today from a remote location, you still get to experience in an incredible onboarding experience. If you're curious to learn more about some of our openings and just like careers in general, feel free to check out shopify.com/careers/COVID-19, or feel free to ask any questions as well, which I'll be able to get to towards the end of the Q&A session, or towards the end of the presentation in the Q&A session. Excellent. So one of the things that Shopify does also is that it encourages employees to be merchants themselves. That helps us understand the platform better. That helps us understand what it feels like to be a merchant, what it feels like to use the platform, and to our skin is in the game. We feel just as much as our merchants do, and that makes us help. That makes the product better as well, and makes the whole platform better. So this is sort of my experiment with running my own store. It's called Rapid Supply. It's an online store that sells apparels, pins, stickers, and accessories specifically for developers. So pretty much all of you folks here today, I genuinely love my JS hoodie. Anywho. So today we'll be chatting about styles and theming in React Native. So there's obviously tons of projects that are currently going on at Shopify, ranging from all sorts of stuff. I'm specifically part of the client team that's working on the Shop app. The Shop app is a shopping assistant that helps you keep track of all of your orders. It helps you pay better, and it helps you shop better. There's all sorts of rediscovery elements to it. So highly recommend checking it out. So the Shop app is 95% React Native, fully cross-platform for both iOS and Android, and the remaining small portion relies on a couple of necessary native modules for each of those specific platforms. Now, what I'll be talking about today are some of the problems that we faced when we first started building the app, and how some of our best practices and a library that Shopify built called Restyle helps solve some of those problems for us. So one little tidbit to know is that just up until a week ago, Shop was actually the Arrive app. So we were secretly working on the Shop rebrand and everything else that came along with that for over a year. So I'll be talking a little bit about that as well, and how we were able to get, how we were working on Shop while still releasing new functionality and features and polished work on the Arrive app as well. Excellent. So the first thing that comes about with any project is trying to deal with managing colors. Now, colors are notoriously hard to name. They're hard to keep track of, and they become super hard to maintain. So for example, like one of the first things someone will do is just create a dedicated colors object in like a theme file, for example, and then, like define all your colors there, which you can use across your components using the Style Sheet API. Now, the color names are not super useful. Like there's no like well-established patterns here. Like, so we had things like primary and secondary and body, and then awkward things like background 1 and background 2. And then more like context-based colors like error. So this was like super frustrating to try and use and try and maintain. It just becomes like super, super gross the longer you end up needing to use it, and as you add and remove or adjust colors already existing. Now, similarly, font styles are just as painful. So we realized that we were needing to write a fair amount of code to style every single text element that exists in our app. So we were applying font sizes, weights, letter spacing, transforms, obviously colors, then a bunch of other stuff. And we just realized that like, hey, look, this is just styling for 3 text components, but look at how much code we've had to write already. And not only that, we noticed that we were duplicating this over and over again across a wide range of components and screens. And that was just becoming increasingly difficult to manage. So one of the first things that we did was we said, hey, let's follow a similar approach like we did to the colors. Let's build a font styles object in our theme file and bring all of our different styles there. So we defined our heading 1, heading 2, body, yada, yada, everything else there. And then we would import that where necessary and just spread those font styles where we needed to apply them. So this helped alleviate some pressure with regards to like the code duplication. So that was kind of nice, but it didn't resolve all of our problems when it came to dealing with font styles. So we had two main reoccurring issues. One was, let's say we had a font style called body, and we came across an opportunity or like a scenario where we needed to just override one specific style. So let's say we had like a small description. So we would spread the body styles and then just override one property. So we were never super clear as to like what the best approach would be for us here. Like, do we just continue to override this one item here, another item elsewhere, and all of them are actually still using the body font style? Or should we create a brand new font style that accommodates this small override as well? So that was kind of weird. The second thing was determining, it was challenging to determine how broad or specific the font style name needed to be. Was body too broad? Was call to action far too specific? What happens if we needed to apply all the same styles that the call to action font style uses, but the element is not a call to action element? Do you still use it? Do you go through a massive renaming process? It was just kind of icky and kind of gross, and that obviously just like escalates as the app begins to grow. The repetition problem, like although fixed a little bit, was still not great. We still had far too much repetition. It was just incredibly frustrating to have to bring in all of the stuff over and over again and just spread these different font styles across the board. So that was definitely something that we wanted to address. Things became harder and harder to update, harder to maintain, keep things consistent, especially due to one-offs. And this like became worse as time went on, since we've been working on the project for quite a while. This became even more of a problem when more and more devs joined the team. We started off with just 2 folks, and that's grown quite a bit since then. So as new developers joined, as developers started working on various aspects of the app, it just became harder and harder to manage, and things just continued to escalate. We also had 2 new features that we wanted to work on, or 2 new aspects that we wanted to work on. One was introduce dark mode. That was one of the most requested features back when we didn't have it. We knew that like this was something that was necessary, but we knew that our current state of already trying to handle our colors, or managing colors and our font styles and styles in general was just not going to work well. And we ran a couple of experiments to see how introducing dark mode would work, and it was a nightmare. There was just like a ton of spaghetti code all over the place, and we knew that that wasn't the approach that we needed to take. The second thing, as I previously mentioned, was that we knew that we were heading towards this massive rebrand from Arrive to Shop. We were going to be relaunching Shop with a new aesthetic, new colors, new font styles, new typography, new UI, a whole bunch of new stuff. And we needed a way to continue or to begin working on Shop without needing to touch the way Arrive currently functioned, or without interfering too much with how Arrive worked today. We released new updates super often, so we couldn't just stop working on Arrive and just put all of our efforts towards Shop. So that wasn't an option. So it needed to be something that would accommodate both of those things. So flipping yikes, like it was a lot. Like clearly our current problems already were plentiful, and then needing to introduce dark mode and introduce like this entire new rebrand somewhere down the line really caused a lot of frustration. And this was an opportunity where our team took the time to take a step back and figure out a better way of approaching this. And this is sort of where a solution came to be. Part of this is just best practices that we've put into place, and along with the Restyle library that I mentioned early on. So Restyle is open source. It's built in-house by Shopify, so but it's available for all of you folks to use as well. It's a type-enforced system, or Restyle provides a type-enforced system to help you build UI components. Now, the awesome thing here is that themability is baked in from the get-go. So if and when you decide to introduce dark mode or an alternate theme or a completely new like visual aesthetic of your app, like there's no new functionality that you need to add. It's there right from the get-go. So it becomes almost trivial to introduce some of those new things. And I'll show you what that looks like as well. I'm going to walk through some of our new best practices, some of the concepts that we've put into play, and some of the new features that Restyle introduces, and how all of those things come together to create a really, really awesome developer experience for Shop. So the first thing we need to do is we need to define a theme object. So this is a global theme object that is going to be used by Restyle. Restyle relies on this global theme object that has a set of spacing values, color values, breakpoints, and a whole bunch more. We won't be able to get through all of the things that Restyle provides, but I'm going to focus on some of the biggest aspects. Cool. So the way we then utilize that theme that we just created is by using the theme provider. This is also provided with Restyle. You wrap your entire app with a theme provider, and you pass in the theme that we created using the theme prop to the theme provider. The theme provider uses React context behind the scenes. Awesome. So that's all we need to get Restyle hooked into our app. And a crucial point to remember next is that this is like unrelated to Restyle, but that the relationship and understanding between your designers and developers needs to be rock solid. You have to be, we realized that we needed to reference colors the same way, sizing the same way, components the same way, use similar terminology in the naming system that was established for those things to make sure that like we were having the most efficient conversations as possible, and future iterations of work were very easy to handle. So when it comes to colors, quite often, anytime when a design team or a design person is working on a new design system, they'll quite often start with a color palette. A color palette will consist of a set of base colors and then lighter and darker shades of those colors. In this case, I've got two examples. And then obviously you'd have like black and white and some other like body colors or stuff like that. So it's vital that this is established properly. If one doesn't exist for the app that you're working on or are going to work on, I highly recommend building one out. This is the first step to help keep your design team and dev team in sync. Because one of the first steps that you have to do as a developer is to first build out a palette object. Now, this is outside of your theme. This is independent from your theme. There's no app context. There's no UI context. All this is a code representation of that palette. So you're taking that color palette that's developed in or put together in a design tool and essentially migrating that over into code into your app. What we want to do then is use those colors within our app. So within our theme, sorry. So now notice that in our colors object, we're defining specific keys and then values, which are the color values. Now the keys here, so main background, card primary background, those are very descriptive, and those are context-based keys that we give or names that we give. So you know exactly where something specific is being used. So button primary background is extremely obvious as to where that this is being used. And the second part of this is that you'll notice that, for example, two items are using the same color from our palette. So card primary background and button primary background both use the purple primary. The cool thing here is that if at any point in time the design language needs to change or we need to make some design changes where one of those needs to change, it's extremely trivial to come in here and update just one of those to something else. You're not worried about, oh, hey, like if I accidentally change this, what other crazy ripple effects is it going to have across my entire app? So you can feel comfortable knowing that, hey, I can make this one specific change for this specific context, and I know that everything else remains the same. So this is like one major aspect of how managing colors can become significantly simplified. Now, we also noticed that quite often a design system will have a spacing system as well. If not, it's pretty nice to include one. And because this makes it a lot easier to define a spacing system within your theme also, and then space things out a lot quicker and a lot easier. So we used a multiples of a number convention to define our spacing values. So over here, we've got multiples of 4. And the naming convention that we utilized was like how t-shirt sizes are established. So we've got small, medium, large, extra large. And the cool thing here is that this can easily be extended to larger and smaller values using the X notation. So you could introduce double XL, triple XL, or fight like in the opposite direction, just have XS or double XS. You can even introduce like negative spacing values if that's something that your app needed. But we tried to avoid that as much as possible. So we really liked this approach of spacing values. It just made things far more manageable and a lot easier to quickly identify and apply across our app. Okay, so the view and text component that React Native comes along with, we realized that they weren't the best starting points. We wanted to find a way to create more feature-rich alternatives. And so this is where Restyle comes into play. Restyle provides two functions that help you create replacement components for the view component and the text component. So there's the create text function that Restyle provides. So over here, we're creating a new text component using the create text function. And similarly, we can create a new view replacement, and our terminology is box. So you're obviously welcome to call this whatever you like, but as long as you use the create box component, the create box function to do so. Now, the cool thing here is that the box and text components that we've just created through Restyle are now the replacement component for text and for text and view. Now, the reason why we want to do this is because these two components, when you build them out, you're also providing details or information about the theme. And what this allows you to do is that both of these components now utilize that theme right out of the box. So what does this look like? So for example, in the component, we can import our new text component, and then you can pass in appropriate style properties using props. So in this, for example, here, I can pass in font size, font weight, and color just by using props. And specific items that we establish in our theme can be utilized here as well. So you'll notice that the color value matches up with the colors object in our theme. So all those colors that we defined in our theme can now be utilized directly using our new text component. So color properties, measurement properties, and a number of others can be are pulled in from the theme and can be utilized here. So pre-Restyle, I mentioned that we had moved all of our font styles into this like big object that we were in our theme file that we were using all over the place. So the text component also accommodates something like that. It accommodates the variant prop. So you'll notice on the right-hand side, I'm using the text component with a variant prop. And the values for this prop are picked from the text variants key in your theme. So within your theme, you can introduce a new thing here called text variants and provide all of your different text variant styles here, and then easily apply them to the text component as you need to. So this eliminates a lot of code duplication and really, really streamlines the entire process for defining text styles. You can obviously still provide overrides, so the style prop is still something that the text and box components accommodate, but we want to try and keep them to a minimum, just because that's how like overrides, or sorry, how like one-offs get introduced. So you want to try and keep those to an absolute minimum and avoid trying to use them at all. This just really helps keep things like really nice and clean from a Restyle perspective. You can also take this a step further. So when you define your new text component, you can also define the default props for that text component, just like you would any other React component. So we can define that the default text variant is body and the color is foregrounds regular, for example. So what this allows you to do is that anytime you use the text component, and let's say these are like default styles that we need to use over and over again, you don't need to provide any props at all to the text component, because all of those are there by default, and any text component that you initialize or that you bring in will by default look like body content, which is amazing. So this immediately reduces tons of duplication and creates a more simple and cleaner app. So The box component does something similar to the text component, but it adds the ability to use some additional props. These revolve around padding, margin, alignment, border, so essentially like layout related things as well. So you'll notice here that my padding values and my margin values here are using values that I've established in the sizing object within my theme. So this allows you to really, really quickly define these spacing values and the padding values and border styles and whatnot for these like layout containers. Okay, so now let's go back to theming on dark mode. We know we want to introduce dark mode, or we want to introduce a new theme. So that's sort of how we built the new shop rebrand. We essentially created a brand new theme behind the scenes and worked on that. So how do we implement that? So if for this given scenario, I'm going to be implementing like a dark theme for a demo app. So implementing something like this can be done in a few simple steps. The first thing we need to do is we need to define a new theme and base it off of a default theme. So in our case, I'm defining a dark theme, and the first thing I'm doing is I'm spreading the entire default theme here, and then just only overriding the values that are going to be different for this specific theme. So quite often when you're implementing a dark mode theme, not much changes aside from colors. So over here, I bring in the exact same default theme, I bring in all the colors again within the colors object, and then just override the things that I need to for that specific theme. So this keeps it very isolated as well from your base theme as well. So it keeps things easy and it keeps things clean and easy to manage. Now remember that we still have our palette, so you're still overriding these colors with values from your palette, and like the palette just comes into use again. It makes it even easier to make those necessary changes for your dark theme. The next thing you want to do is you want to be able to store the theme value someplace and introduce the ability to be able to toggle those values back and forth. So in this super trivial example, I'm just using the useState hook from React to set a value for something called dark mode. You'll notice that I've got a switch within my app that just allows you to toggle the value of dark mode to true and false. And then the only other change that we need to make is previously our theme provider's theme prop was just taking in the theme that we had created. Instead, now we need to pass in dark theme or theme based on the value of the dark mode variable that we created, dark mode state variable. And that's literally it. So all of your Restyle components, like the box component that you're using, the text component that you're using, will automatically adjust to the currently selected theme automatically, and you now have dark theme or an alternate theme baked into your app. Now, what you do with that value of the current theme is up to you, whether it's just a state variable or you're putting it into some persistent state or whatever it is that you're doing with that. That's entirely up to you and very dependent on how you build your app. But I just wanted to demo how that ties in to actually toggling the theme for the actual app itself. So Restyle also provides the ability for you to handle responsiveness. So let's say you need to accommodate various phone sizes. So something that we can do is that any prop that Restyle optionally accepts or Restyle accepts optionally accepts a value for each screen size. So you can define these different screen sizes as breakpoints in your theme. So in a new breakpoints object within my theme, I can say that, hey, this is the minimum size for a phone, and this is the minimum size for a tablet. You can also introduce other ones as necessary. So you can, so below that, you can see that you can either just provide a value for a style prop, so flex direction row, or you can pass it an object with key value pairs, with the keys being the different breakpoint values. So I can say that on a phone, for the phone breakpoint, I want the flex direction to be a column, and on tablet, I want it to switch to a row. So this works with any prop that you can pass into box or text, and you can easily adjust sizes, layout, margins, paddings, whatever it is that you might need to be able to accommodate your app to those various range of sizes. The Restyle library also provides a use theme hook. There's obviously will be a number of scenarios or use cases where you can't use the text and box components. So for example, if you're using something like React Navigation to implement navigation across your app, and you're using the default headers that come about, you can use the use theme hook to determine or to pull in your theme and pluck out the necessary color values and pass those in to the React to the headers and any other component that doesn't use the text or box components from Restyle. And the one thing to also mention is the overall developer experience. Now, given that all of this is tied to using TypeScript, if you're using hopefully a text editor that uses or is powered or utilizes TypeScript, you get all the type enforced benefits and the awesome dev experience that TypeScript provides. So you get all of the awesome autocomplete functionality when you're building out an app. So you'll notice that as I'm typing and adding in these different properties for different styles, it's showing me all the options that I have, which immediately, like, I can't even express to you how the efficiency in which you'll be able to start building your apps once your theme and the two starting components are defined. Now, there's also a ton of other features that we don't necessarily have a chance to get to today. I wanted to keep this talk focused on the absolute core and minimum features that, like, I think absolutely highlight the power of Restyle and some of the new processes that we've established within our team. So the two that I can quickly mention is that Restyle, for example, allows you to create your own custom Restyle components. So, for example, let's say that a button component isn't similar to a box or a text. Let's say it's got a lot more nuance behind the scenes. You can create a custom button component that is powered by Restyle and all the benefits that Restyle comes with, unique to your app. Similarly, you can create a custom card component that might have like shadows and rounded borders or whatever else. You can either build that on top of the box component or create a completely custom Restyle component. Restyle also provides a bunch of functions that help you control what some of these custom components are able to do and not do. So, for example, the text component that you create through Restyle isn't able to take on layout properties, isn't able to take on uh, uh, things that are like border properties, for example, because those are specific to the box component. So, but let's say you wanted to create your own unique component that needed to be, you can control which specific properties become exposed to that unique component. So those are some of the features that, some of the additional features that Restyle provides. There's a whole bunch of others, and I recommend checking out the docs if you're curious to see what those look like. Awesome. So thanks so much for having me and for listening. Once again, check out Restyle on GitHub if you're curious to learn more about some of the functionality and see some more demos and whatnot as well. Once again, if you're curious about Shopify, curious about careers, definitely check out the shopify.com/careers/COVID-19 page and our general careers page as well to see what positions are currently open. There's two more things also. I've set out a number of hours tomorrow for office hours. So that's the link there, and I'm sure it'll be shared to all of you as well at some point, or it already has been. Feel free to take it down there as well. So there's a number of open spots for you to book. If you'd like to chat about Shopify, if you'd like to chat about career stuff, if you'd like to chat about Restyle, or anything React Native particular as well, book a time slot, and we can have a lengthier conversation to discuss things there. After this, I'm going to switch over to Q&A mode. We'll have a good chunk of time to answer some Q&A questions, and anything that doesn't get answered here, I'll make sure to continue to send out answers or my replies through Twitter. And also feel free to follow me on Twitter as well to ask any additional questions that you might have there, so we can continue the conversation going. And we would absolutely love to hear what your feedback is about Restyle and what you can do with it. Cheers. So I am going to switch back over to Click Meeting. I'm going to stop sharing. Awesome. So One of the questions was, what about the breakpoint propping theme? How are you using it with React Native? I understand I showed that early on, but didn't get a chance to explain it until later on in the slides. So, yep, you just provide an entire object with the keys being the breakpoint names, and then the value that you want to apply at that specific breakpoint. So hopefully seeing that allowed you to understand what was going on. Awesome. Maybe so. Next up, maybe for orientation and tables. Oh, I'm assuming that was more so an answer for the previous question. Would breakpoints incur rendering performance costs? So we haven't noticed any issues at all. So the main place where we end up using a lot of breakpoints is that we don't really support tablet officially. What we do instead is adjust our styles based on the device size or the mobile phone size. We've noticed that you can have like a super small iPhone to a pretty hefty Android device, and like we weren't able to have like this magical one size fits all like UI. So we were using breakpoints to adjust those different sizes and adjust those variables depending on what your device size was or what your phone size was. We haven't noticed any performance issues at all, so that's been pretty neat. We can obviously do a lot more like performance benchmarking to determine if what cost there might be if there is one. But from our initial experiments, our initial usage, we haven't noticed anything at all. And the one thing to mention here also is that Restyle is like fully baked into the Shop app. Shop relies entirely on Restyle and has been for a number of months now. So we implemented it a little while ago when we introduced dark mode officially for Arrive, and have been using it ever since. And we were essentially building this hidden theme along with other functionality for Shop. And we essentially just had to like flip the switch for all of our users to be able to get access to the awesome new Shop theme. Another question, will there be a recording? Yes, I believe that all the participants who attended here and who will be attending future webinars will be receiving a link at some point next week. Awesome. So another question here is no positions, remote being from Brazil. I'd encourage you to continue to check back. We are hiring. Obviously, the listings that we have there will continue to evolve as new positions open up. Feel free to send an email out to someone as well, or to the main careers email address to find out a little bit more about if and when positions might be opening up that would accommodate your particular scenario. Yeah, highly recommend that. Oh, I think, yeah, Simon, you're killing it. Just drop questions in there and I'll keep popping them up here as necessary. Another question from Omar, which state management library are we using? So we rely on, so for all of our GraphQL needs, we rely on Apollo. Apollo cache is what we use to store our state, and we use context to handle most of our state changes and just update Apollo cache. We don't use Redux, we don't use MobX or anything else like that. Another question, this one's from Michael1. Great presentation, thank you so much. Is this library compatible with React Native Web? That's an excellent question. I don't see why it wouldn't be, but we haven't personally tried. We don't have any projects, like the Shop team isn't working with React Native Web, so I'm not 100% sure, but I don't see why it wouldn't. Would be very curious to try it out, and maybe we can get back to you on that as well. Next question. So this means from Simon. So this means we don't use stylesheet.create at all in our app if using Restyle. Yep, that's correct. So unless you absolutely need to, there's no place where you would need to create or use the stylesheet API because all of your styles are being passed in. All of your style values are being passed in as props to your box and text components, along with any other custom component that you create. So this was definitely super weird when you first get started. It seems kind of strange, but I guarantee you're going to love it. You'll have significantly less code. The styles that you're applying are inline, you'll be reading styles where they're used, not at the bottom of your component file or whatever else. So just ends up making for a really, really nice developer experience by just not having to rely on the style sheet API. Excellent. Next question from Daniel 2. What do you do if during development it occurs that you need to add a new spacing with values between medium and large? Yeah, that's a great question. So I think this comes back to having a really well-defined design system in place. Ideally, if your design stuff is done properly and your design team is utilizing those same spacing values, a new value between margin and between medium and large should never magically just occur. Sometimes, if a design is evolving, yes, that might happen, and that's something to take into account. For example, the spacing values in the shop rebrand might have been different than the arrive default styles. So in that case, we had like a brand new set of spacing values that we were able to use for that theme. But more particular to your question, if you did need to add new values, you would have to go through the exercise of, for example, renaming large to XL and introducing that new value in the middle, and making sure that your those values get updated across the board. That will be definitely a little bit tedious, but ideally, like if you have your design stuff figured out ahead of time, you'll be able to avoid that as much as possible. The next question is from Balat. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Why you folks didn't use any existing libraries for theme controlling? Great question. So we did a bunch of exploring. We looked at a bunch of alternatives and things that existed already, but honestly, nothing was hitting all of the check marks, all of the criteria that we had, all the problems that we were experiencing. We weren't able to find something that checked off all of those. It had solutions for all of those things while providing a developer experience that the team would be happy with. So we ended up needing to essentially roll our own system that worked well for us. And because we loved it so much, we thought it would be an awesome opportunity to like open source it and give it back to the community as well to see if other people would enjoy using it too. Next question is from Salvador. How did you plan dark mode with your design team? Yeah, that's a good question as well. Fortunately, our design team had experience working with stuff like that. They definitely like took the time to go through all of the different screens, all the components to figure out what they needed to look like in dark mode. One of the first things that they did was updated the palette, the color palette, to introduce the alternatives that they would potentially use for dark mode, and then created the necessary like duplicated components and screens with the darker values or alternative values in place. And that's what we used to define our new theme. And then it became like almost trivial to switch things out for the new theme that we created. Next question is from Robin. Will Shopify create a React Native starter like the one with Next.js? That's an awesome question. We haven't considered doing that yet, but if there is value and if there's interest in having like a starting React Native project that has Restyle baked right in from the get-go, that's definitely something we can look into, and I'll be happy to chat with the team to see what we can do. Another question is from Godwin. Hi, Software Mansion. Would this be on YouTube? I will let someone from Software Mansion answer that in the chat. Next question is from Rafi. Storybook or style guidist is part of the developer experience or not? A great question. We do use Storybook heavily. We rely on Storybook entirely. That's where we start off, where we have a dedicated story that's just all of our different colors and all of our typography elements, and then all the different components that we've created. And we've built in the functionality to be able to toggle the theme back and forth in Storybook as well. So as you're developing a new component, you can go into settings, toggle it over to dark mode, and then make sure that your component looks okay, or test it out immediately there as well. Next question is from Balat as well. How much animations do you write in your projects on React Native? So the shop app in particular has tons of animations. We use the reanimated library extensively, which is why we're working so closely with Software Mansion to further develop it and bring new versions of it out into the future. We're heavily invested in animations across the board. I highly encourage you to check out that entire experience. The onboarding flow itself has lots of animations, so definitely check that out. Next question is from Eduardo. Can you change only the theme colors on the fly, or do you need to change the whole theme? So you could create an entirely new theme that so you'll notice that when I was creating the dark theme, the first thing I did was I used like the 3-dot notation to spread the entire base theme. So what that does is immediately duplicates all the values that the main theme has, and then I just add in the overrides for the theme colors. And if your app looks like layout wise, spacing wise, the exact same between light mode and dark mode, then that is all you need to do. You just need to provide the color overrides in your dark theme. Now, sure, it's called a theme, but all of your values are identical to your base theme except for the new colors that you've provided as overrides. And that's really all we did to introduce dark mode to the Arrive app back when Shop was Arrive. Only when it came to introducing Shop did we get into some of the other nitty-gritty details to change a lot of the other styles, like the font, the text variants, and some of the spacing values, and some of the typography values, and a whole bunch of other things as well. Another question from Robin. What about Tailwind CSS in React Native? It seems quite close to the proposed architecture. Yeah, you're right. Tailwind does something very similar to this. We just sort of had like very specific things that we wanted to implement ourselves. There wasn't necessarily something that existed already for React Native. So this is what our team came up with. Obviously, it adds like a couple of unique features that pertain to our specific problems or React Native problems that Tailwind doesn't necessarily address. We felt that this worked pretty well for us. Next question from Scott. Do you wind up using Restyle for most components in your app, or is it mostly around view and text? How do you decide when to create custom Restyle components? Great questions. So for the first one, do you wind up using Restyle for most of your components in your app? Yes, we do. Like practically everything, like 98% of our UI uses Restyle across the board. There might be a couple of small instances where we just have like inline, like we just use the style prop to provide different values that we need to grab from like animation values, for example, animated like position values or something like that. But when it comes to stylistic things, we try and rely on Restyle as much as we possibly can. So anytime we're not able to use Restyle values, or like let's say we're not able to use like the box and text components that we created through Restyle, we get to use the use theme hook that Restyle provides, and so we can pull in those theme values from there and apply those as necessary. So quite often, if you're using like a third-party library or that I don't know, like builds a component like a slider or something like that, that might have its own set of ways that you need to provide colors, for example. So that might be a place where you can use the use theme hook, pull in the current theme, pull in those color values, and pass those in to whatever the API needs are for that component. And how do you decide when to create custom Restyle components? So this is This is a good question as well. So anytime where we had a component that required a lot of unique functionality, a lot of maybe like dynamic styling needs as well. For I think like the button comes into mind because you have to accommodate different states with regards to default state, disabled state, loading state, maybe a couple of others, lots of different variants as well. So that might be a great opportunity. As soon as you realize that, hey, things are getting a little crazy while trying to do this with just a default box or text component, that's an awesome opportunity to create a custom component. There's a bunch of additional details about this in the README for Restyle on GitHub, so I recommend checking that out as well. Next question from Rafi, talking about style, but what about state on the shop app? What are you using? So already got a chance to mention that. We're just managing state using context where we can, and our state sort of lives in Apollo Cache, and we just update those values as necessary. We don't use anything like Redux or MobX. Question from Omar. What do you think of GraphQL versus REST? What do you prefer? Shopify has been a long-standing supporter and developer in the GraphQL community. We're like super gung-ho and very enthusiastic about GraphQL. We use GraphQL extensively across Shopify, and our app is no exception. So we heavily use GraphQL and use Apollo as our GraphQL library. Can box behave as an animated .view? This question is from Danilo. I believe it can. You'll have to double check the docs because I don't fully remember if that's the case or not. Regardless, if it doesn't, then that would be an opportunity where you would just use the default view component from React Native to handle any animated related things. But if I remember correctly, I believe it does. Question from Matthew, do you use Reanimated? I'm assuming that's the question, and yes, we do. We use it quite extensively. Next question from Godwin, how did you get into coding with React Native, and why choose it over Flutter? Good question. So a couple of things here. Firstly, Shopify isn't stopping using native development. When there's a time and a place and it's obvious to use native development, that is the route that we will go with. But for the most part, if React Native makes sense, we will use React Native. That is like the default approach for new projects that would start at Shopify. And now why we chose React Native versus Flutter or anything else, Shopify is a huge, we've invested heavily in React and the React ecosystem. We rely on React heavily in our front end, React as our front end stack. So we already have so many developers at the company with React expertise. So to illustrate this point even further, why React Native was the better choice for Shopify in particular, was that like I myself am not a mobile developer. Like my background comes from Webland. Like I was primarily like a UX developer, then did a bunch of JavaScript, did a bunch of backend like Rails stuff for a while. So I had no mobile experience. So one of the things that we experimented with or tried early on in the app was like, hey, let's build this app and let's explicitly bring on someone who has no mobile experience whatsoever to see what their onboarding experience is like. And that's sort of how when I came into the React Native picture at Shopify. I knew nothing about iOS. I knew nothing about iOS development. I knew nothing about Android development. And I was tossed into this to say, hey, how quickly can someone with React experience, with web experience, with no mobile experience ramp up in a React Native context? And within like 3 to 4 days, I was contributing to a mobile app, and it was the coolest experience possible. And I've been with that ever since. Next question from Wojtek, I hope I pronounced your name right. To clarify, does Shopify hire people on remote or not at all? Shopify does hire remote. It's not for all teams. There are specific teams that hire for remote workers. So definitely check out the careers page because it will clearly identify which ones are for remote and which ones are not. Question from Jasmine, how do you handle image or some other third-party package component style? Image, so with regards to images, so quite often the only thing that you're applying for images are so I think the image component is something that you have an option for. You can either create a custom Restyle component that handles images that you can then pass in style-specific properties to the image component, or you can leave the image component as is. Let's say you don't use a lot of images and you're fine with dealing them in like the old school way, that's fine too. Quite a lot of times we'll try and utilize the box components to sort of define the layout and styling, or like sort of like the sizing for the inner image component as well. So that's a way that you can handle that. Or you can just use the use theme hook and bring in the theme values and the color values and sizing values from there and apply them to the image component. Another question from Matthew, do you use Reanimated? Heck yes, we do. We use lots of it. What do you use to persist data? We use Apollo and persisted storage to handle our persisted storage needs. Another question from Tino, do you use something similar to Storybook for your components? Yes, we definitely do. Next question is, as far as Restyle is concerned, how do you structure your files? So we have a components directory where we have our default box component, we have our default text component, any other Restyle components that we would create. And aside from that, we have any other standalone components like a card or a button or like an announcement card or something like that. All of those are individual components in like in a components folder. And then we have dedicated I guess like feature folders where we have our screens and views where we get to use those components and sort of essentially like stitch those together to create those screens. Next question from Kem or Sem, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Do you use something like REM to responsibly scale fonts or even UI elements? No, we do not. We just rely on the breakpoints to define any overrides that we need to create in sizing. I've previously experimented with a couple of libraries that will dynamically resize values as like as the device changes. They've worked okay. They're a little bit harder to control. So we felt that something that was a bit more explicit in the way we manage sizing seems to work a little bit better with us. Another question, any tips on how to synchronize values with designers and ensure that they do not diverge? Yeah, this is a great question. You need to have, first and foremost, you need to have an awesome working relationship with your design team. You have to work well with them. You have to understand them, be friends with them. And honestly, I cannot express to you how valuable that is and how big of a role that plays with your app having less bugs at the end of the day. Communication needs to be top notch. I work with my designers. I talk with our designers every single day to work on what's happening. Any synchronization issues that do emerge, I immediately sync up with them, try and figure out a way that we can stay within the established patterns. If we do need to introduce a new value or a new color, we have an actual conversation, and it's not just, oh, okay, I guess we're adding a new one in. Everything is like very thought through, and we don't just like willy-nilly add new things into our themes. Next question from Rafi. This means Android and iOS use the same design. They do for the most part. There are a couple of instances where we change the way styles are applied based on the current platform that you're on. The header, for example, feel a little bit more native based on the specific platforms. And there's like the buttons also, like we'll use the ripple effect versus the opacity feedback effect on iOS. So those are handled the normal way that you would using the platform API and then like just ternary checks. Next question from Simon. Would it be too shameless to drop a plug for my latest open source React Native Shopify app, sellflow.com? I will leave it as that. Salvador, you mentioned that a rock-solid collaboration with the design department was necessary. Please tell us more about how to achieve this. Yeah, so I kind of spoke about this already. If you have more specific questions regarding that, I'm happy to answer that. The one thing I would recommend also, I guess, is to, depending on what tool your design team uses, have access to those tools as well. Like have an opportunity or have space and like, you know, the relationship to be able to give feedback early on in the design phase of an app too. Like the design team takes feedback from developers very seriously. They like listen to us. We have an awesome working relationship, and we work like super collaboratively. And part of that goes into an education aspect too. So, like instead of just saying, "Hey, no, we can't do this," explain to them why something can't be done. Help them understand so that they have that knowledge base as they're continuing to evolve and develop new screens. That will go a super, super long way to make the entire experience of developing way better. What do you use for debugging Apollo? So we use React Native Debugger, the standalone debugger tool, to check all sorts of like debugging related things. I believe there's a couple of other standalone apps that just like help you keep track of like the requests that are being made and whatnot. We also have like graphical built into our graphical endpoint, so that allows us to check for those sorts of things. If there's a more specific question regarding that, like feel free to ask. I'm skipping over a couple of questions that were already asked. Another question, sorry, I'm just going to butcher your name, so I'm not even going to try. Do you keep your custom UI as a separate NPM package, or is it embedded in the app? We keep our components embedded in our app so far. So the different projects, the React Native projects that are currently going on at Shopify don't have like a unified UI yet. Like Shop has a very standalone aesthetic. It's like our buyer focused product that looks very different than the rest of Shopify. So there hasn't been a need for it to be packaged up and be reused in other places. If and when that comes up, then that's something that we would definitely be able to do. Question from Tino, did you face any difficulties integrating Storybook with React Native? No, we did not. If you have any specific things any issues that you're facing, feel free to book us some time tomorrow or chat or send me a message on Twitter. We can chat further. Question from Juan, what do you use to organize the project with your team? We use GitHub projects. We have an add-on called ZenHub that helps manage GitHub projects a little bit more. So that's what we use from a development standpoint. I'm not entirely sure if the design team uses anything in particular, but the design team, we do have access to the design tools that they use. How about React Native Paper? A question from Matthew. We haven't had a chance to use it. I've used it on a couple personal projects, but it just has like a default aesthetic by default in itself, and that didn't match the aesthetic that we were going for. We have like a very, very unique UI experience or UX experience for iOS and Android for Shop, so that didn't necessarily make sense for us. What do you use for React Native? What do you use for navigation? Question from Godwin. We use React Navigation. And a follow-up from Rafi, are you using React Navigation? Yes, we are. Question from Eduardo, what do you use for shadows in Android? Only Elevation or any particular libraries? We just use Elevation. Next question, following question, do you force designers to design without shadows? No, we do not. That would be super mean. There's obviously an understood notion that shadows that they don't have to redesign the same screen or that has shadows or component that has shadows for both iOS and for Android. They'll design it predominantly for just one. And I'll have the designer come over and we can just like play around with those specific numbers for the other platform. So just to make sure that like it feels right and it looks right. And that's like pretty much all we do. We like sit pretty close to our design team when we're in the office. When we're remote, we chat with them pretty often. We do lots of Q&A and like lots of internal releases so everyone can like get a chance to test things out on our app. Question from Diego: 5 essential libraries for your apps. Go. Note: Restyle is not allowed. Well, that's definitely not fair, but okay. React Navigation is definitely our go-to for navigation stuff. They recently released a few months ago their newest version, which looks awesome. So like we definitely liked it a lot. Apollo for all things GraphQL related, since that's our Shopify's like de facto way of handling data APIs. Reanimated for a lot of our animation needs. And honestly, I can't really think of anything else. We have a bunch of internal libraries that I can't really mention. Um, we we have like a bunch of libraries to deal with like tests and some internal GraphQL stuff. So I think those are the main ones that come to mind that I like repeatedly use over and over again. Yeah, that's all there is to that. Question from Salvador: how do you handle safe area views? Just how you would normally, based on the directions that are provided. Safe area views just behave the way they normally do. There's really like no difference in the way the documentation, for example, would describe it. Question from Hamad: any reason why you didn't use declaration merging to allow people to define the theme type globally instead of having to import it in every component? So you don't have to import the theme into every component. You only have to import it where you're creating your Restyle components. So we just import it where you have where you define the box component or the text component, or if you end up yeah, so like that, those are like the only places where we actually have to do that. And then as long as you're using the box or text components or any other Restyle component, you have access to the theme type, to the theme object. What do you guys use? What do you guys do about testing? From Osama, we have lots of tests. We do lots of integration tests. We do lots of unit tests. We heavily test our app. We also have a pretty big QA process that our team follows. So our product team and design team also play a big role in making sure that our apps look and work the way they do. Storybook plays a big role in testing as well, even before any of that other stuff comes into play. We heavily rely on Storybook to build out all of the different variations of a component. A question from Rafi: using Detox for tests? No, we currently do not use Detox for tests. What is your testing workflow? From Andor? We first and foremost, TypeScript plays a big role in this. Just helps keep everything enforced in terms of like linting rules and whatnot, which is great. We have obviously like linters as well, based on like Shopify's internal style guides and whatnot. So everyone's like writing code the same way. Storybook to build all the different variations of a specific component for both light theme and dark theme, since we can like toggle those back and forth. And our design team hops in to validate that those things look okay. Lots of unit tests, lots of integration tests, and then like lots of QA from the entire team, because we have nightly builds that go out. So everyone on the team gets like a new version pretty much every single day that they can test out and give feedback to the client team. Another question about design stuff: do designers use Figma or Sketch and InVision to handle designs, and where are design tokens values defined? We use Figma for our design related things. And yeah, so all developers have access to Figma as well. Um, yeah. I'm not sure what you mean by design tokens and values. Feel free to expand on that if you would like. Question from Alex: how do you handle the keyboard? We use the default keyboard avoiding view component that React Native provides. We haven't needed to do anything beyond that. That's worked perfectly fine for us. Another question from Hamad: how do you do visual regression testing, and how is it a part of the CI/CD workflow? Great question. So visual regression testing is something that we're still trying to figure out like a good solution for. We don't have something super figured out for it just yet. We previously used to do snapshot. We had snapshot tests, and we would do diffs on our snapshot tests themselves. at first it was super great, but when the app became pretty big, it just wasn't super useful at all. So we stopped doing that, and we haven't personally found like a very good alternative that we are all happy with as an alternative. Regarding CI/CD in general, though, everything does pass through proper CI/CD workflow setup before something is available to merge. And also before a release goes out, the entire testing flow is gone through again as well. Another question from Hamad. I recently moved from using Storybook to using React Cosmos. Have you guys evaluated it? And if so, why did you choose Storybook over Cosmos? Nope, I have not looked at it personally. I'm not sure if anyone else on the team has or not. We integrated Storybook very early on in the project, and it's been working pretty well for us. We haven't really noticed any issues with it. I'll definitely take a look at Cosmos, and yeah, thanks for mentioning it. Question from Nick. Do you have a custom solution for keyboard-aware scroll views, or do you use a package, or do you make sure inputs stay at the top? Text inputs are really the biggest challenges I face with React Native UI. So we don't have a custom solution for keyboards. We just use the default keyboard avoiding view that React Native provides. And I think there's a couple of different props that you can pass in for how the content needs to adjust. And I think those have worked out pretty well for us. Thus far, we haven't really faced too many text input related issues, to be honest. Feel free to get in touch or set some time up tomorrow, and I'd be happy to chat more about your specific challenges that you might be having. And next question, does Shop live in a mono repo? Currently, it does not, but who knows? Let's see where the world takes us. I'm going to, just a heads up, I'll begin winding down in another 5 minutes or so. Feel free to keep asking questions. Anything that doesn't get answered in the next 5 minutes, I'll make sure to answer on Twitter. So feel free to follow me there. Yeah, so we'll get a chance to go through all of them regardless. Another question from Had. Oh, I think this is just a follow-up about React Cosmos. If you switch to React Cosmos, visual regression testing is a lot easier, and the dev workflow is a lot nicer since you can work on each screen in isolation, not just specific components. Very cool. We'll definitely give it a shot. We currently just build out each screen and different views in Storybook as well, and that seems to work out okay for us. But I'll definitely check out React Cosmos. Thanks for mentioning it. For Kyle, a question from Kyle. When dealing with breakpoints for different screen sizes on both platforms, what styling values do you find work best? Percentages, aspect ratios, standard integers, etc. We've personally only tried standard integers, and that has worked super well for us. We've been able to quickly, we previously had issues with, a design might work great for a large iPhone, but look super terrible on an iPhone SE. But just based on breakpoint values as integers, we've been able to really mitigate all of those issues, and it's become like a way better developer experience. And it's been pretty easy to be able to introduce style overrides and whatnot as necessary, or like alternatives for a smaller breakpoint. So I mean, give some of these other things a shot too if you feel like that might be easier for you. Integers have worked pretty great for us. Question from Andor. Is there a good solution for having a shared code base for multiple similar apps? I'm not sure. I think I would obviously recommend trying to build things, look into a monorepo. I believe there's a couple of tools out there that help deal with this stuff really well. So that might be something that would work for you. Or you're just building standalone NPM packages that all those different similar apps would consume. And then you pull in the necessary code from there. Next question from Nick. Yarn 2, or NPM? I believe we're still using Yarn. We're not using NPM. I'm not sure if we're using Yarn 2 or not. Tess, how do you manage accessibilities and text component issues in the app? Right. So behind the scenes, the box component is still a view. The text component is still, like the one that you create, is still a text component from React Native. So all those properties that all those accessibility related properties that React Native provides are still a fair game. So you would use those just the same way. Accessibility is something that we're still working on and improving slowly but surely in the app, and I'll continue to like maybe share some thoughts in the future of when we have like some best practices or something put together, if that is something that would be useful. Question from Juan. What do you think about Expo? I love Expo. I think Expo is great, especially if you're learning, especially if you're starting things off, especially if you're building something small. There's a number of small internal projects at Shopify that use Expo. There's a number of projects that I've built personally just to like personal projects that use Expo as well. We knew that Arrive, or back when it was Arrive, now Shop, couldn't use Expo because we knew off the bat that there would be a couple of specific native modules that we'd be using. And so that immediately doesn't give us a lot of the benefits of Expo. So we went with a vanilla React Native project. But definitely, like, I'm a huge fan of Expo. It's come a long way, and I think it's pretty dope. Question from Tino. How many breakpoints do you cater for? I believe right now we have 2 or 3 breakpoints, nothing more than that. We don't really tackle like phablets and iPad related things specifically, but if and when we decide to support those, then we would obviously include multiple more breakpoints. Another question from Omar. Can you explain how your directory structure looks like in a React Native app? Kind of hard to describe here. I might put together like an image or a diagram of how we normally like to structure our apps, and I might share that on the socials. But we definitely keep our mocks separate, our tests separate, our data stuff separate, any like GraphQL stuff in the data folder. And then we break our app down into components and then features. So a component are things that are used across various screens and whatnot. A feature would be, so for example, if you've seen the shop app, there's like deliveries related stuff, shop related stuff, settings related stuff. So those would be 3 individual features. And each feature folder has like the screens and views that combine the different components and React navigation and whatever else, and essentially glue it all together. So that's sort of like how we break things up. Our apps like gone through a couple of different iterations in terms of directory structure. We've been enjoying this one so far, but like who knows how things progress. I'm going to go through 2 more questions, and then I will wrap things up here. Actually, I can take it a little bit further and just go through another 6 minutes worth or 5 minutes worth. All right, question from Hamad. How do you handle dynamic prop-based styles for more advanced use cases? Button components are usually the trickiest with that. Icon placement, color, outline, rounding, etc. Contrast-based text colors. Good question. Buttons our button component, for example, accommodates a type prop, and that type prop drives a lot of what that component looks like in terms of like icon placement, whether or not it's there, whether or not it's not there, colors, borders, rounding, sizing, that kind of thing. And then, but we still, from like the styles that it still applies are like done in a Restyle specific way. So yeah, like the type of button defines like whether it's an outline button or a default button or whatever you want to call those things. And then like, whether or not you want to show icons or and whatnot. But the actual styles themselves are applied using the traditional Restyle way. Question from Jasmine. How do you handle Android performance issues? We don't have any Android specific issues right now, which is pretty awesome. We definitely, anything that we build, we test with some of the low-end devices in mind, and we battle test them on low-end Android and iOS devices to make sure that we're getting like an awesome experience across a wide range of things. Honestly, it was just like optimizing our code a little bit better, using reanimated rather than using the default animated library, trying to offload things from the JS thread as much as possible. Paginating our queries was huge. That like made a huge difference. It was pretty like very common things like that that really helped alleviate a lot of pressure off of the and like solved a lot of our performance issues. Question from Salvador. I'm using React Native Paper for the inputs UI mostly. What would be your killer argument to switch me? Ooh, To be honest, I'm not super familiar with React Native Paper, so that's a little bit hard for me to say immediately. But I would say that if you plan to, at any point in time, introduce themes or dark mode or completely change the way your entire app looks, and you want to do it slowly over a short period of time, or you need to introduce the concept of breakpoints, I cannot tell you how awesome Restyle is. Honestly, just spin it up in like an Expo app or something and give it a shot first, and to like clearly feel the power. Like it feels awesome to like be able to use those specific tools in particular. Question from Omar, have you faced any list performance issues? Yes, we did early on. Pagination helped a huge deal, and trying to avoid having dynamic sized components in your list makes a huge difference as well. So if your components are of a fixed size and you're using pagination, those two things alone will eliminate the majority of your list performance issues, and it definitely did for us. Question from Aman, how do you keep or have been following breaking changes in React Native recent released versions? Do you often update the dev mode in a separate branch? How are you handling this? Great question. Someone will take on the responsibility to upgrade the version, go through all of our tests, go through like robust testing to make sure everything works okay. When something like that does go in, like given that we have nightly builds, everyone gets to test out the new version of React Native to like really battle test it before it like eventually gets into all of your hands. Yeah, so we're like pretty careful with updating React Native versions given like our pretty large user base for Shop. Yeah, I think that's about it. Question from Josh, do you go through Gradle dependencies and use more up-to-date versions than that what base React Native ships with? I'm not entirely sure. So we have native iOS and Android developers on our team who like if and when something like this comes up, they will sort of like champion those efforts, which is pretty nice. So like I am a little bit familiar with that stuff, but not as much as they obviously are. I get to focus on like my expertise, which is just focusing on the JS side of things and focusing on React Native. But that's a great question, and might be something that I can follow up with my team and post the answer on Twitter. Question from Tess, are you using font for your icons or is it tiny images? Great question. We explored using building a icon font, but we were not stoked about that approach right off the bat. Anytime we would need to introduce a new icon or change one that already existed, we would have to rebuild a font, like the font, and that's just something that we wanted to avoid. I don't know if things have changed since then. Like this was almost like 2 years ago now. So instead, we have our own, so all of our icons are SVGs. We have our own icon component that allows you to just pass in the icon name, and then it renders the correct one, and we handle sizing and colors and everything else with it. Yeah, so that worked out super well for us. Juan, I'm sorry, but I have no idea what that means. Osama says, do you use the default modal component or a custom implementation? The default modal component doesn't seem to play well with the React Native gesture handler. Yeah, we do not use the default modal component. We found it super limiting right off the bat. We tried a couple libraries as well, and we weren't super stoked on those either. So now we have a custom in-house solution for handling modals. Cool, I believe, so we are a little bit over time, but that's okay. There's still a couple of questions left. I will once again get to those, get to that in on Twitter. Once again, there's a bunch of time slots open. I think there might be still some open for tomorrow, so feel free to set some time up if you would like. Cool. Thanks for joining. This has been super awesome. I wasn't expecting so many incredible questions. I think we spent more time on the Q&A than the actual like talk itself, which is awesome. Love chatting with you folks. Hit me up on Instagram. I'd love to chat further. If we, yeah, I I feel like if I go through the remaining questions, more will pop up. I've been trying to do that for the last 15 minutes, so I'm like not going to try addressing these ones. But yeah, I'll definitely get to these on Twitter. And yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was awesome. Loved getting an insight into what's happening in the world of React Native. Definitely follow myself and the Shopify engineering handle on Twitter as well to see what's happening. I'll be sharing lots of thoughts and whatnot. If you have specific things that you'd like to learn about, hit me up, let me know. I'd love to do more of this in the future, share more thoughts and more ideas and things that might benefit the rest of the Shopify, or sorry, rest of the React Native community. And yeah, perfect. So someone's just shared my socials. Twitter is definitely the best place to get to me. On the same handle on GitHub. I don't think people really socialize on GitHub. I'm also on Instagram. If you'd like to see me post one photo every 3 months or so, I am so bad at it. But Twitter is the way to go. Awesome. Thanks so much, folks. I'm going to. I think I can just quit from here. Paulina and anyone else from Software Mansion, if there's anything else I need to do before signing off, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to shut things down. Excellent. So I'm going to end things here. Awesome. Thanks so much, folks. Have a good one. Bye. Stay safe.